G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing David Gaz from the Small Projects Bureau based in Los Angeles, United States. Thanks for your time today, David.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show, Troy. Love what you do.
Thank you. I know you've listened to a few of our episodes. I'm really looking forward to our chat today. Let's start with how we know each other. Omar from ABM Podcast put us in touch and thought you'd be a great guest.
Yep. Awesome guy. Books us on podcasts. Love him to death.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Absolutely. We're the Bureau of Small Projects. Let me tell you a little bit about how we started, which will kind of put it, it's kind of a roundabout way, but I'll put it into context.
Sure.
So we're primarily a branding agency, but I used to be a partner in a firm that worked exclusively with Fortune 500 companies and big brands. And then a while back, about 10 years ago, we were politically in America in kind of a time like we are now, where people were just treating people really poorly. And, you know, politics and all that, and they just had a license to treat people badly. And I noticed that our clients weren't being really nice to us. People on our team were bickering with each other. And I started thinking, why can't people just be a little nicer to each other? And I was reading, around this time, I was reading this article in Scientific American about these two guys, James Fowler and Nicholas Christakis from Harvard University, who had scientifically proved that kindness is contagious. That if I do something nice for you, you will statistically, scientifically proven do something nice for 4 more people. And then each of those people will do something nice for 4 more people, and so on and so on. And so being in marketing and media, we love anything that's kind of viral like that. So I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I thought maybe it would solve my problem with people being nicer to each other. And so I used the resources I had at my disposal to produce a feature-length documentary called Kindness is Contagious, a film all about being nice, but more importantly, the benefits of being nice. While we were talking to all these scientists, it became crystal clear that whole thing about nice guys finishing last is totally bogus. That nice guys actually, believe it or not, make more money. There's a few super rich, mean guys, but the vast majority of sociopaths are in prison. So statistically, nice people make more money. They have better jobs, which makes sense because who hires jerks, right? They get more promotions, of course, the same reason. More friends, which is very useful in today's social media environment. Great family life, of course. And then the thing that got me the most was nice people actually physically live longer than not nice people. And so I started looking at all these benefits, and being an entrepreneur my whole life. My first business was an ice cream truck when I was 16 years old. Being an entrepreneur my whole life, I started to wonder, are there any businesses that are using kindness for success in business? And we interviewed these Silicon Valley startups, healthcare organizations, nonprofits, again, people that their day job was making the world a better place. And I started to get jealous because I wanted my day job to be making the world a better place too. My day job was sucking every last penny out of people's pockets. And my son was born around the same time. So I thought, gosh, what could I do to make my day job be like theirs? And so what came to me was, what if I taught these people that are making the world a better place how to suck every last penny out of people's pockets and then put it to use for like the betterment of mankind? And so with that in mind, in my old company, I created the Bureau of Small Projects as an incubator. And the name came from that as well. You know, we did multi-million-dollar projects, and I didn't want to scare away the people that I wanted to work with. And after about a year, my business partner came up to me because I was spending all my time working with the Bureau of Small Projects. And he said, David, why don't you start paying more attention to our real clients? And he used the whole air quote thing. And I said, Kevin, why don't you take a look at our balance sheet because it seems like we're financing your real clients now. And at that point, we got into one of these founders fights that you probably heard a lot of on your show. And I
And been
split.
through plenty of my own. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Partnerships are rough. And so at that point, I spun off the Bureau of Small Projects into its own company, which was rough because we had a non-compete thing, and I left with a handful of clients and a few people from the team, but I had to kind of start out from scratch all over again. But it was a really, really cool journey because we doubled in size almost every year for probably the first 5 or 6 years. Um, and it's been absolutely wonderful ever since. All our clients are they're either entrepreneurs of small businesses, they're startups, or they're nonprofits. And generally speaking, people that like one of our criteria are people that are making the world a better place.
Yep. So none of them are assholes, basically.
No,
Yeah,
no.
that's good.
Every once in a while, but I don't think anybody's truly an asshole after doing the film. I think deep down inside everybody has like a heart, like kindness in their heart, but I think they're taught that nice guys finish last. So in business, some people feel like if they don't want to finish last, they have to be a jerk.
So maybe explain to the audience a bit more about what the business does now, specifically, how it helps other businesses.
So we're primarily a branding agency. We also do web development because when you create somebody's brand, you create their messaging, their logo, all of that. First place that people see a brand is a website. So we kind of made an in-house web team just for that. We like everything to look good, and we have more control if we have the developers in-house. And then once you got a website, the world needs to see it. So we also do marketing and advertising. And then the key to marketing and advertising is great content. So we also develop our own content.
Right. Yeah, very important these days. And content marketing, where a lot of people think is dying or dead, is still very much alive.
Oh, we're in the golden age of that now. Absolutely the golden age. I think people are confused with what content is, though. I think it's blurry. They don't realize podcasts are content, articles are content. And we've never had more avenues to get your messaging out to the world than we have now. It's amazing.
Yep. And so what year did you start the Small Projects Bureau, and how old were you?
We are almost 10 years old now. I'm an old guy too. This is not my first rodeo. Um, but we're almost 10 years old. So it was about 2014, 2015 that we started.
Yeah,
Can't
great.
believe we made it this long.
And how old were you then, 10 years ago?
Oh God, you're gonna die 50.
50. That's, yeah, you're a spring chicken.
Yeah, yeah.
And how you started out, you said you had an ice cream truck when you were 16. I think I was 11 or 12 when I started my lawn mowing business. Do you want to maybe take us through any other businesses or part of your career from, that first business, 16, right up to now?
Yeah, well, it's been a wild ride. I think the ice cream truck was the formulative one because it taught me everything about business all the way through. Taught me not to be afraid to be an entrepreneur. When people learn to do business, they think that they have to have a business plan and that they have to have financing, and they have to have like a great idea for the business. And what I learned from the ice cream truck early on was the best experience was all you need to know in business is you buy something and you double the price and sell it to somebody else, and then take half the money you make and keep it yourself, the other half used to buy more stuff to sell, and just keep repeating that and repeating that. Throw a little bit of your own money in and it grows, take more money out and it dies. And simple as that.
And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over the last 10 years?
Yeah, yeah. When we left, we literally left with zero money because I got in a fight with my co-founder with the old, or I wasn't even a founder, I was a partner, but my co-partner, or whatever you call it, we got in a fight. So he tried to cut me off. I left with no money at all, and then we got in one of those fights. So he tried to cut me off from my money from working in that, and then we kind of came to some sort of arrangement, but it was like pulling teeth. So I basically had to hit the ground running. So I'd say technically we started with zero. However, we did have a few clients, and again, not my first rodeo, so I kind of know how to hustle up clients and all of that. And so let's say we did zero. It's funny because I was thinking about this, like this question, and I bought Bitcoin early on. And I remember I did really well. I think I'd spent like $1,000 on Bitcoin back in the day. And then when I sold it, I made like 40x my investment. Sold 1,000 for $40,000. I was like, oh, and this was well before the peak that it is at now. But then I was thinking with the business, I think we did better than Bitcoin with the business because technically we started out with zero. First year was a rough one, 50, 60,000. Doubled it by the next year. And so we made probably 120, 150 the next year, 300, 600, et cetera, et cetera. And now we've kind of plateaued in the last couple of years, but we're in the 3 million, like 3.5 million.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, Dave. That is amazing growth. What about number of full-time equivalent team members you started with and where you're at now?
We started with 2 or 3, well, probably one full-time, which was me, and then some contractors. And now we're 40 people in the business, and I'd say 12, maybe 15 full-time people.
So the 12 are full-time and then the other 28 are casual part-time?
Contractors. They're contractors because we do a lot of creative, so you need a certain style for certain projects. And we have kind of interesting, unique clients, so we have interesting, unique projects. We're starting a really cool AI project for a science fiction author, Harlan Ellison. And so, you have to bring in a specialized team for like AI team for that. So that's why we have a fair amount of contractors.
Okay. So would you say, including the contractors, equivalent full-time, the whole team around 25, 30?
Yeah, because they're about part-time and they're about half-time. So I'd say 25, 30. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great.
I'm not a huge numbers guy, forgive me.
Don't worry, I am. When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I can tell you the exact moment was Bill Nye, the science guy. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's this guy, the science guy for kids on TV, and I kind of grew up listening to the guy. And then they reached out to us to rebrand the Planetary Society, his company. Really cool guy. Carl Sagan I'm a science geek. Carl Sagan started the Planetary Society. And when Bill reached out to us to rebrand it, I was like, we made it,
That's great. What does success look like to you?
Success is not having a boss, being able to do whatever I want. I'm not money driven, I'm time driven. Success to me is having time.
And perfect question for you. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
The number one thing, and I can tell you a little story about this as well. It's when people we do primarily branding, and when people we come from a Fortune 500 branding background, and when small business reaches out to us about branding, they usually ask for a logo. And the one thing I'd love to tell anybody starting out is your brand is absolutely not a logo.
Yep.
A tiny piece of your brand. Your brand is what is your value proposition, what it is that makes you different and better than your competitors. And it takes a little while to wrap your head around that. But when I first started the Bureau of Small Projects, and I've been in the big brand world with all the acronyms and everybody talking about like customer personas and all of these fancy words. And so I had to kind of figure out a simple way to explain branding to our clients. And I remember when we first started our company, we did a WordPress website. My old company was all Magento, which is kind of a very sophisticated platform. And nobody was clicking on anything on our website. Nobody reached out. Nobody clicked on anything. And I was like, damn, WordPress is horrible. Our website's broken. Why did we do this? We should have gone with the Magento.
Magento is very expensive. Well, Magento is very expensive, isn't it?
Oh,
like
horrifically
20 grand a year.
Mm. And then Michael Newman, who kind of heads up the marketing of our company, he said, hey, let's play with the messaging a little bit. And our messaging at the time was what I thought was a very clever saying. It was small is the new big was kind of our branding, our messaging. I thought, oh, this is really clever, but it said nothing about what we do. And so we got to kind of the core of the value proposition, which is Fortune 500 and big brand experience put to work for small businesses, startups, and nonprofits. And when we got it that simple, nothing clever, just stated what makes us different than our competitors, it exploded. People start clicking all the time. We get 3 to 5 people every single day that reach out to work with us now. And that was the transformational point. And that's, I'd say, anybody who's starting out a business, figure out what you do, learn about your competitors, learn what they do well, learn what they do poorly, and then articulate what you do that's different and better than those folks you just learned about.
Totally agree. And writing copy or the words we use, the messaging is so powerful, very, very important. It's something I've certainly spotted up in the last couple of years. Have you read either of April Dunford's books on positioning? And so, first book's called obviously Awesome on positioning, and the second one's called Sales Pitch, obviously on sales pitch. Have you read either of those?
I have not. I
Yeah,
have not.
they're great.
But I'm glad you didn't mention Simon Sinek because he's, yeah, I know he's super popular and people probably hate me for saying this, but I can't stand his approach.
What about, have you read Donald Miller's Story Brand book?
I have not. Um, I'll tell you the book that probably made the most impact on me was Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath.
Okay. Made to stick, huh?
And it's
Yeah.
it's awesome book, and it just breaks it down into real simple terms. It's it's all about story, it's all about standing out, it's all about getting people's attention. It's an absolutely fabulous book.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of that book. I've just jotted that down, added to my list. So thank you. And what was the other one? Anti-Fragile.
Anti-Fragile by Nicholas Taleb.
Hmm. Great.
And what kind of struck me with Anti-Fragile is I'm an old guy, right? So I was in San Francisco at the absolute height of the dot-com movement. And it was like the roaring 20s. It was absolutely fantastic. Parties all the time, crazy. Everybody had tons of money. Everybody was driving Porsches. Everybody had huge lofts. I mean, it was absolutely nuts. And then, like that, everything dropped out of it. And people were like, hey, do you got 10 grand? I'm trying to sell a Porsche for cheap. And it was bizarre. And like businesses were empty. It just devastated the city. I've never seen anything as abrupt as that. And Anti-Fragile is kind of, I think, the philosophy for business nowadays. I think business changed dramatically at that moment. That no, you couldn't ride on your laurels anymore. You had to you had to be flexible. You had to pivot. You had to just kind of live by the seat of your pants in business. And I think it's still that way today.
Yeah. And how did you fund the business? Sounded like you bootstrapped it, but have you taken investors on along the way, or it's just you own the business outright?
I've not taken investors. I own the business outright. I don't want investors. I've kind of resisted them. Every once in a while, you kind of toy with the idea. But I made a movie a few years back, a feature film with Universal, and I started out my professional life as a fashion photographer in Paris, and then typical anti-fragile moment, everything went digital, prices dropped out, you couldn't earn a living as a photographer anymore. I mean, to be fair, we earned an obscene amount of money at the time. So I had this clever idea to pivot into film. And I thought, hey, I used to do big photo shoots for like Levi's and all these big brands, and 250,000, $500,000 photo shoots. So I thought, movies, how hard could it be? It turns out, Troy, very hard. And so I took on my agent, got all these investors. I put in $1 million of my own money into making my first feature film. I thought it would be awesome. Screwed the whole thing up. It was a god awful mess. We sold like nothing. I lost all our investors' money. All they did was hound me all the time, bug me all the time. I don't know if you've had investors, but having investors on your back is the most awful thing in the world. So I'd say if you can resist it at all costs, do not get investors.
Yeah, so you decided for this business that really scarred you, that experience with the film. So you no investors in this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then what's beautiful is you own everything outright, so you can make any decision, any mistake as well that you want.
Yeah. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yeah, I kind of think we're in just a beautiful industry right now. We're in the golden age of entrepreneurship. Marketing and branding is like a superpower once you understand how it works. When I was a photographer, I was a commercial photographer. I wasn't a fine art photographer. And in commercial photography, you're always selling other people's products. And my job is to make their stuff look awesome and sell their stuff. And I always wanted to own the machine. And I think that's why when it all fell out and the movie tanked and all that, I kind of went to my roots because I studied advertising and design in school. And I kind of went back to my roots. And I think that the difference is when I was doing all the creative stuff, which I loved. I mean, it was a fabulous career, but it was really tough hustling up clients. And that's the part I never really liked with business, which is why I wanted to own the machine. Um, I think when you're selling something like art, you need people to want what you're selling. And when you're creating branding and websites and doing marketing for folks, they need what you're selling. And so the communication and the relationship with your clients is much different that way. And I really, really like just the nuts and bolts factor of selling something that people need rather than trying to convince them to want what you're selling, if that makes any sense.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It keeps going. So the when you're doing a bit when you start a business or when you have a business, and now again I'm 16 years old to now 60. I just turned 60 this year. I've had a lot of businesses, and they've all got the kind of same pattern. Maybe a very mature business, not so much, but I think they do too, where they seem to go to hell periodically every like year or two. That you think you got your handle on everything, and then something always pops up that's unexpected, and then the whole thing goes to hell, and you have to somehow wrestle it back again. So the stressful thing is, first time it went to hell, we didn't have a lot of revenue, but that's when it gets. I think that's when it's kind of toughest. Was a $10,000 problem. I remember at the time thinking, "Oh my God, how am I going to come up with $10,000?" Very stressful. Um, then the next thing that happened was maybe a year later, all went to hell again, and it was a $20,000 problem.
Hmm.
So you start to get a little more used to it, but it's kind of like a sword of Damocles hanging over your head. Third time was a $50,000 problem. Next time was like a $100,000 problem. Beginning of last year, we had about a $500,000 problem. And so I've got this constant like anxiety or stress that I know the next one's going to be $1 million problem.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
People, people. A lot of people, when you're starting out, you think the hardest thing in a business is finding clients. And granted, it is tough. That's the fundamental thing you need for any business is to have clients. But once you kind of get the groove, you kind of know how to keep the formula is keep the clients you have, get them to talk about you so you get referral clients, and then at the same time have some sort of mechanism to generate new business. And when you get the three of them going, it kind of goes on its own if you don't screw it up too badly. But then once you start to get to be a certain size, and like 3, 4, 5 employees, not too bad. You're like a gang, you can talk things out together and stuff like that. But when you get 10, 20 employees, it starts to become a living organism that kind of goes on its own. And if you don't keep that organism healthy, it can be just a nightmare. All you deal with is people complaining and problems. Everybody, I think, in any business thinks they know better how to do business than the boss anyway. And then you get a bunch of people bickering with each other, and it's awful. So I think the hardest thing in business is really creating an environment where the people get along and they like each other and they're happy.
Yeah, it's one of my sayings. I believe the hardest thing in small business is people and its greatest asset. And one of my favorite sayings I heard some years ago, it's an old Texan saying, which is the definition of conflict is two people in the same county.
Mm, yeah.
I'm not sure if you've heard that one before, but we're human. We have our bad days, and we're all different. And yeah, so
Or
putting
just two people is
yep,
the definition of
yeah,
conflict.
that's it in the same
Yeah.
county. Yep. Mm.
Yeah.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
It's what I've enjoyed the most and least, right? It's the people. It's all about the people. One of the things that really clicked for me when we go back to the value proposition was when we came up with Fortune 500 big brand experience, put to work for small business startups and nonprofits. Um, I realized that, hey, now my hiring's kind of easy because all I need to do is hire people that have big brand and Fortune 500 experience. A friend of mine, a client and friend of mine had a nice saying with that too. Is he said, you know, your value proposition is working for you when it makes the decisions for you. You know, you have a good value proposition when it starts to make the decisions for you. And so that was my epiphany, and it made everything crystal clear. I love working with really, really smart, talented people. However, um, they're challenging. Steve Jobs had this metaphor for it. As he said, he was talking about a neighbor down the street, and when he was a little kid, he lived in Palo Alto, and they're all like the tech geniuses everywhere. And his neighbor down the street was one of these old time programmers, one of the creators of everything that we do today. And he said, Steve, I want you to come in and come into my garage. I want to show you something. And he shows Steve with this rock tumbler. I don't know if you've seen it. You know the rock
Yep.
tumbler? It's like a coffee can on the side. And he said, let's go out to the garden. They picked up a bunch of broken, hard, pointy stones, and they put it in there and put a little bit of sand in there, a little bit of water. He said, start it turning and said, I want you to come over tomorrow morning. And so Steve Jobs went over the next morning, and there were all these beautiful polished stones. And his metaphor was that's what it's like working with really smart people. Is you put them in a room together and they fight and they complain and they bump up against each other and they don't quit. They just keep going and going and going and going and going like that rocket tumbler. And then at the end of the day, you come out with these beautiful polished gemstones.
Right. I hadn't heard that story. That's a good one.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely beautiful. It blew me away. And to me, that's the beauty. It's so fun to work with people. It's so fun to get those gemstones, but it's also the hardest thing in the world to do.
Does that answer the next question? What do you love most about growing a small business? It's working with talented
Same
people.
thing, working with really, really smart people and wonderful clients, you know. One of the things we did like last year when it all went to hell with my $500,000 problem, one of the things that caused that problem is we had a bunch of clients and a bunch of people on our team that nobody got along with each other. People on the team didn't like the clients. There were people on the team that didn't like other team members. And so we gently fired the clients and I gave them all of their retainer back 100% because I didn't want to be like letting them down. I didn't want them to have an excuse. I didn't want lawsuits. I didn't want that kind of vibe in my life. But it was they give a bunch of clients all their money back after you've done the work and paid all the people. It can be quite a hit. And then I kind of did a similar thing with the employees that weren't getting along with other people. And it was a beautiful thing. It was a really, really tough thing to do. No judgment on the people or the clients either. I think it was about fit. They weren't bad people. The people on our team weren't bad people. But what we kept were the weirdos.
Right.
And when we start hiring people now, that's what I look for, are the weirdos. I think weirdos are more tolerant of other people. I think that they're more adventuresome in many ways. You know, if they're gonna, we have a saying, people fly their freak flag high. If they're bold enough to put that out to the world, they're usually bold in a lot of other aspects in their creativity and all of that.
Yeah.
So we look for weirdos now.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Mindset shift. Okay, I'll tell you a good one. I realized that everybody started asking me what, I think when we started to get into the $1 million of revenue, people started to want to buy our business. People started to take notice. We recently got on the list of the top 10 ad agencies on Investopedia, top 10 ad agencies for 2024. And then they're like huge ones like Ogilvy and Mather, and then our tiny little agency. And so people started asking me, what are your goals? And I started to think about that, and this is the mindset shift, is I realized I'm not a goal-oriented person at all. I'm a path-oriented person because I couldn't come up with an answer for what my goals are. And the shift was maybe realizing that. And so I just kind of embrace the fact that I go down the path. I don't have any set destination, but I go, ooh, that looks like an interesting place to go. And then I walk down that path. And then you often come to forks in the path where you have to make a choice. And then rather than have a singular mindset towards a goal, I just kind of look at the forks in the path and go, ooh, that one might be more interesting, and just meander down the path without any idea where it's going to lead. And it's kind of fun and exciting and keeps life worth living, I suppose.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Oh, I can tell you a definitive answer to that because our clientele are entrepreneurs. They're small businesses making a difference in the world. They're startups. And you learn a lot when you work exclusively with these kind of people. You start to see patterns of what works and what doesn't. And the number one thing that I could positively say for success in a business is don't give up. That's the only thing I can find in common with the successful businesses we work with is they never quit.
Yeah, I've got on my desk here. I probably can't see it with the blurred background, but it's one of my favorite quotes. The secret of success is constancy of purpose. That's Benjamin Disraeli, one of the British prime ministers. Yeah, so true. Persistence.
Yeah.
Want specific advice to help you get your business through its number one growth challenge? Book a free 20-minute growth chat with me, Troy, the founder of Grow a Small Business. I'll recommend some resources which will help you grow your business with ease so you can live the lifestyle you've signed up for. Go to growasmallbusiness.com and click on Growth Chat.
Can you talk to how you've added people or weirdos to the team? Some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening.
Yeah, we rely a lot on people on our team. They tell us about their friends. Like if somebody is looking for an interesting job, they recommend their friends to us or bring people that they know. You got to be a little careful with that though too, because it can have negative effects. But generally, if somebody's really talented, they have a lot of talented friends. The value proposition is really cool too, because when you start creating an attractor with your business. And that's kind of was, I think, the turning point of what I really like is I never have to hustle up clients anymore. We attract them. But we also attract, and so you start attracting, once you start attracting a lot of people, then you start saying, oh, we've got too many people are being attracted. So you try to focus that a little bit. And you kind of start creating barriers. So you only get a certain type of people. And you can kind of start to identify who you want as clients, which is really cool. And knock on wood, I don't take that for granted at all. But what's cool is once you start having really weird and cool clients, then weird and cool people start reaching out to you as well to work for you. And so I think that is the best way when you kind of get this machine, it's all comes down to that value proposition. What do you do differently and better than your competitors? And when you get that machine going, you attract really interesting people as well.
What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Hire weirdos.
Never heard that before.
Yeah. It was a change in everything when you start, hiring people that they get along. I think not necessarily weirdos. If you're not a weirdo, I'm a little bit of a weirdo, so I hire people like me. But I think you start. When we had everything go to hell, I started looking for people based on their resume, and we were lucky enough to have absolutely stellar people starting to reach out to us that had stellar resumes. And so I started looking and being very impressed by the resume. And I think the shift in the culture was, they got to be good at what they do, but I started hiring to be a fit. Are they compatible? Do they fit with our culture? And so our culture is a little bit weird, so that's why I say we hire weirdos. But I think for any business is rather than look at the resume, that's a small portion. But if you want it to be a sustainable culture, look for people that get along and people that kind of fit with you.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
I've become very zen. I think I've always had to because I've been a hyper stressed out person most of my life. I think when you're an entrepreneur, stress just comes with the territory. I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world because you also have control of your whole life. When you work for somebody, you're helping them realize their dreams, and when you're an entrepreneur, you're working for your own dreams. And but the price you pay for that is an awful lot of responsibility and stress. When you work for somebody else, the people you're responsible for are your family, maybe your kids. When you run a company, you've got 40 people who depend on you and their family and kids as well. So the weight on your shoulders becomes a lot more, and the stress level, is kind of the price you pay for that. So Zen's been very important to me. And as we were talking earlier before we started taping, fly fishing is my Zen. I go up into the mountains with nature. We have bighorn sheep. I hike up about 5 miles into the wilderness where no people hike up, and I go fly fishing for trout on these beautiful small mountain streams, and it's paradise. Everything just slips away.
Yeah, as I said to you before we hit record, we'll have to get you down here to Tasmania. There's literally thousands of lakes here for fly fishing, not far from where I live.
I may take you up on that. That's my Zen. It just takes me down from all the stress in the world. It just all goes away when I'm fishing.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
That's an interesting question. None. I'm terrible with that. Um, the mentor question is something that I think is significant, but I'm terrible. I'm a total introvert. I don't really like being around other people. I'm very great one-on-one with people. I'm not good with groups. I can talk in front of a group, no problem at all. But being like in like a expo or something, with a crowd of people, not my thing. So I do almost no professional development in that way. I read a lot of books.
I was going to say, yeah, books. So you do read a lot of business books.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so you've had mentors or coaches along the way?
Yeah. I would say my whole career has been guided by mentors. I've been very, very lucky. When I was 22 years old or so, I graduated from art school as a graphic designer and advertising major. And then in my first job, I was in San Francisco and I studied in LA. And my first job, I didn't know anybody in San Francisco, but I was offered a job in San Francisco, and San Francisco is a pretty cool city. And I was breaking up with my girlfriend at the time, so I kind of wanted to get out of LA. And so I was sleeping in my car with a 12-foot boa constrictor. And my plan was I was going to work in this agency that had hired me as an art director for a month. It was fairly well paid. And then with my first paycheck, I was going to get an apartment. And so after about a week of doing that and sleeping in the car, one of my friends from art school came up to interview with the firm that I was working at. And he said, "Oh my God, David, I can't believe you're working here." And he goes, "How does this happen? Where are you staying? You don't know anybody in San Francisco." And I said, "Don't tell anybody. I'm sleeping in my car." And then up from behind one of the cubicles, Eric Adegaard, one of my closest friends in the world to this day, he was the creative director at this agency, and a French guy, and he goes, "Oh my God, this is unacceptable. You must stay with me." And hardly knew him. He let me stay at his house. 2 days later, he went for a month-long vacation in Paris and left the whole house to me. We became super good friends. he turned out to be one of the founders of Wired Magazine.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
later on, this was
Yep.
before Wired Magazine,
Yep.
but later on, he was one of the creators and the founders of Wired Magazine. But he was always had these really smart people around him, and he said, "Ah, Davey," I said, "Why do you even hang out with me? All these people are like people starting stuff like Wired Magazine." I go, "Why are you even hanging around me?" He goes, "Ah, David, you've got a spark in you, but you need to see the world." And so I had an opportunity to go to Paris through Eric. And Eric had hooked me up with a bunch of job interviews there when I got there. And I got a job right off the bat in Paris. I didn't speak French. They didn't speak English. I had to have Eric call them up to find out if they had in fact offered me a job. And they had. And my relationship with him, he taught me so much, was life changing. I had a scholarship from Kit Heinrichs, who's one of the partners at Pentagram Design, which is one of the biggest design firms in the world. He helped kind of point me in the right direction and navigate career things. When I was a photographer, there was this photographer, Pierre-Yves Govec, and photographers are notoriously possessive of their knowledge of their clients. They just keep everything to themselves. I think artists in general tend to be a little bit like that. And Pierre-Yves taught me how to, the question, how do I find clients? Nobody ever tells you the real answer, or very few people tell you the real answer. And Pierre-Yves said, you know what you do is you just put all your photography in a little book that looks like a catalog. And this is kind of pre-internet or early internet days. He said, make it look really expensive because then they'll think it's valuable. And then mail it out to every single agency you can think of. And I did that, and boom, I started to get clients. It's where I first started to understand marketing. And so every step of my career has been helped by fabulous, talented, I've been very, very lucky mentors that have just shared little tips to success. And I try to do that for other people now as much as I can as well. Very generous people.
And do you have a board of directors or advisors?
I do not, but along the mentor vibe, and I write for Forbes magazine, and I'm going to write an article about this, I think. When we started doing web development, we were a branding agency, and web development, website development's a mess. It's like the hardest thing in the world. And I was struggling so much with outside web developers that I decided I'm just going to hire them because then they'll have to do what I tell them to do. But managing the production of that is rough. And so I have a friend of mine in Romania that owns a pretty good sized web development firm. And I started asking him some questions, and he was very forthcoming. Oh, you need to set it up like this. Here's how you structure billing. Here's how you organize your teams. And just kind of walked me through step by step. And we started doing these weekly meetings like that. And I kind of knew him at the time. It was through like this portal that we used to get business from. He used to get business from. And we started doing these weekly meetings where he started walking me through everything to set up a web development business. Then he wanted to know about branding, so I started walking him through all the things that you do about branding. We still to this day have weekly meetings. He's one of my closest friends in the world. This summer we spent like a week in Barcelona with the family, his family and my family. We've become super close. It was probably one of the things that helped catapult our business to the next level. When we could, not only were doing branding, web development, then we started doing marketing, then content creation, and it just kind of started exponentially growing the business. And so after that, we're lucky because in our business, we work with all these kind of really cool people and really smart people. I started doing that with people where I have once a week, I have meetings with a handful of really smart people. We never have an agenda. Sometimes like I'm trying to solve a problem and they tell me how they solved it in their business. Sometimes it's just talking about fly fishing or something.
Yep.
But I think that's linked to a lot of the fast growth that we've had with our business. Last year we got on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in America.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's because of these guys. You know, when people are forthcoming and they share all of their hard-earned experience, not like stuff you read in books, but real life stuff.
Yep, totally agree. Now, you're one of the few that we've had on, David, that's exited a business or a few businesses. Any advice for the audience listening and thinking about exiting one day?
Okay, so I've been in this business for a while. I'm not a youngster. I've seen a lot of people exit businesses, and every single one of them to a T, after about 5 or 6 years, they're always looking for a job or having to start another business again. And because of that, I don't do well with bosses. I've had like one job in my whole life, and hated it. So I don't really plan on exiting, except when I leave the mortal coil. Mm-hmm. I like just having that income stream. I like having something that, I don't have to answer to anybody. I love that.
Right, David, one of our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business? I think I know the answer.
Yeah, the people.
Yeah.
Hands down, the people.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Anti-Fragile, definitely. I highly advise anybody to read it. I think it's more than business, it's philosophy, and it's philosophy for today. We're in a very unique environment today. Everything's changing all the time. I get a lot of my older friends that tell me, oh my God, I just got fired, or they laid me off, and they gave my job to this younger person that doesn't have a mortgage and will work for half as much as I do, and they have all these new skills that I don't have. And I'm like, well, what do you expect? I'd fire you and hire that guy, But at the same token, everything's changing so fast now that all you have to do is just take today and say, I'm going to learn whatever's going on today. In 2 years, because it's moving so fast, you'll be an expert at it. And then just keep doing that and you'll be on the cutting edge of everything. And the world's just like changing so fast and you just have to adapt with it. And that's Anti-Fragile's like the philosophy for living in that world.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Yeah, there's this really great one called Grow a Small Business. I love that podcast. It's awesome. It's in Tasmania. The guy's a charismatic genius. That's my favorite podcast.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Ooh, a tool to Zen. I would say Zen. I'm not really, I try every single tool that's out there. They change so quickly. I don't know if there's any one that's better than another. I think anything that centers you and allows you to be resilient and allows you not to give up. So I'd say meditation is the tool, or fly fishing.
Yeah.
A fly rod. That's the tool, is a fly rod.
That's it. Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out effectively when you were 16, 44 years ago?
I would say, business plan doesn't matter. Just start a business. I had this one client that had this. It was a biotech company. He sold it for $350 million, and started teaching at Harvard University. And he said all of his clients all of his students would ask him the same thing: how do you build a $350 million biotech company, and how do you sell it? And he said, it's luck. And he said, luck is like getting hit by a freight train. And I love this metaphor. I like metaphors probably. But he said, luck is like getting hit by a freight train. It only happens if you're standing on the track. And so the advice I'd give to myself starting out, or anybody, is start a business. Doesn't matter what it is, just start a business.
Great advice. Thank you so much for your time today, David. I really enjoyed our chat. Congratulations on the journey, and particularly your latest business, up to around 40 team members, 3.5 million top line over the last 10 years, and helping a lot of great businesses with their brand and their marketing.
Well, Troy, thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
We're getting some great iTunes reviews. For those listening, please pop over to your podcast app and leave us a review.